Welcome to Gospel Diaries, a platform that offers a unique avenue for artists to share their stories, express their thoughts, emotions, and personal journeys. Today we celebrate the holiday season with Dr. Chip Johnson. Welcome to Gospel Diaries, y'all. Listen here, this is Christmas Eve, and I'm so excited to be back into your homes with an inspirational holiday season of Gospel Diaries, and I am feeling so good right now. I'm in the home of Dr. Chip Johnson, and we're about to delve into his Gospel Diaries and just learn so much and hear some good Christmas music. And first and foremost, would you help me welcome Dr. Chip Johnson? May I shake your hand, please?
Yes, you can.
Long time coming.
I see.
And
right.
I
wasn't expecting it, but I'm glad.
I'm glad to be here. I'm glad to be here. Mm-hmm. Listen, you guys, he is an accomplished pianist, musician. He is an educator. He's played with some of the best gospel music pioneers, even secular artists as well. And we're just excited to be here. So, how you doing?
I am doing great, Eric. It's really a blessing to just, I go by this thing, people don't have to be nice to you. And I'm just really grateful that you are being nice to me. I got stories, and a lot of people that watch this and know me, they know a lot of stories about Chip Johnson.
Okay.
But it's just nice to be able to put it on a platform and be honored like this.
Yes.
By the great work that you're doing.
Thank you.
And I appreciate that.
I appreciate that. So we are in this. No, we're not even in December yet. We're in November. How have this year treated you?
Listen, it's been an experience. I have had a year of enlightenment, and it led to my retirement for the second time. Yeah. Most of my career, of course, I was a professional musician during the earlier part of my life, and I still did a little bit of it. But once I got into educational administration, it was very difficult to maintain the schedule of being on the road, playing for people, and then also coming back to work and doing things. And I'm going to tell you, God has really exalted me and just promoted me in ways that I just can't even understand.
Born in Chicago?
Born in Chicago.
For real?
Yeah. I have a family with very southern roots from Elberton, Georgia, where my mother was from. My father was from Erie, Pennsylvania. We have a lot of our family from the South. And so therefore you hear a southern dialect in me that I just have not been able to shake. I was raised by my grandmother and my auntie and my mother, who were all from Elberton. And so they all had that southern twang. My mother would say, she would say, well, you know what, I may be an usher, and I may end up being an usher in church. I said, Mama, it's usher. So it was just a little southern things that we grew up in the family. And so everybody always wonders, are you really from Chicago? But I am.
Holiday season. Let's talk about, did you ever spend any Christmas season in the South?
You know what? We never went to the South in the Christmas season, but during the summer times, we went to the South in Elberton. And I had a cousin named Jan McKinney. She owned McKinney Mortuary, and she was the largest undertaker. They called them undertakers back then. And one thing that I loved Aunt Jan for doing during the Civil Rights era, she would actually ship freed slaves underneath the bodies of caskets, underneath the caskets of bodies over the Mason-Dixon line so they could be free. So you put the hearse, you put the body in the hearse, but then there was a slit underneath the hearse where they put the casket that the man or the woman would slide into. So that when they crossed the Mason-Dixon line, if they needed to be searched, you couldn't find that human body underneath the dead body.
You know what's amazing?
So it's interesting.
Us as African Americans, we are an ingenious race. We have been so clever for years for our inspiration, for our freedom, and we're still clever. You know what? Is it safe to say I am proud to be an African American?
Yeah, I am too. I wouldn't have it no other way. Okay. I had a two-parent home, and so I was fortunate to grow up with a mother and a father, and I have a sister, Denise, right now. She's married with a child in California. But we grew up together. We had the little silver Christmas tree with this colored spinning wheel lights. And we believed in Santa Claus at that time. And we had clothes that would greet Santa Claus. We put out the cookies and milk.
Did Santa ever eat those cookies?
Santa ate up all those cookies.
Was it Daddy?
Yeah, Daddy had to eat the cookies.
What kind of cookies did you put out?
Chocolate chip. Chocolate chip, because that was my favorite chip back then. Look, my favorite chocolate chip cookie.
You giving your favorite cookie up for?
Well, hey, look, it's part of my name, chocolate chip. So they were very professional people, and they provided for us very well. Even when they didn't have it, we never knew it. But they were strugglers. They were entrepreneurs. They were. My mother was an accountant. My father was an electrician. So they made it work, and I saw the efforts of what productivity meant, in terms of making things happen and being successful. I grew up in a home where I was fortunate to see my parents go to work. So I understood what the value was of having the ethics of working. The fortunate things about my life, and people would know the story, but a lot of people wouldn't know the story. But on in my career as a musician, there was a lot of downtime, and I was on the road with different people. I played for Shirley Walls. You had her on before. I played for Dolores Barrett Campbell and the Barrett sisters, and I also played for Sue Conway and the Victory Singers. Amidst other artists that I would pinch hit in for. Played for Aretha's one time, Aretha Franklin's concert one time, and my good friends, Inez Andrews, Dolores Washington, Albertina Walker, and I had an opportunity to really play for a lot of great people. Years ago, I was the assistant minister of music and organist at Christ Universal Temple under Johnny Coleman. Wow. And Reverend Robert Mays was my mentor. Wow. He really wrote a lot of arrangements for Aretha Franklin, not Aretha, Albertina Walker, yes. And for a lot of the caravans and things like that. And so they would always come to the church, and then when they knew me, I was able to be a solo musician for them. They would call me, Chip, can you come play for me here, and things like that. So I was fortunate to really have a solid mentors. One of my other mentors was Nick Johnson, and Nick grew up in California. No, he grew up in New York on the East Coast. Went to California, played for James Cleveland. And James Cleveland had a men's group. I forgot the name of it. But then later on, Nick became the pianist for Aretha Franklin. Yeah, I was raised in the church, and the church I was raised in was a very white-laced church, if I can say that, because it was part of the Congregational Church, which later became the United Church of Christ. And my parents were members at Good Shepherd United Church of Christ, or Good Shepherd Congregational Church. And then later left when the UCC decided to plant a church on the south side, which we now know as Trinity United Church of Christ. Reverend Kenneth Smith Sr. was the founding minister there. Later on, it became Reverend William Jamerson. And then he kind of really, he stayed there for a little while, and then Reverend Shear stepped in after he quit. Reverend Reuben Shear stepped in. And then the church was blessed to get one of the most phenomenal, prolific pastors that this nation and this world has ever known, Reverend Dr. Jeremiah A. Wright Jr. And he came in 1971, I think around 71, 72. And he really expanded the church in terms of his philosophy, in terms of his thinking of theology. He incorporated the black liberation theology. And under him, I was ushered into playing gospel. He's the one who had me pushed into the gospel field by giving me lessons out of his own pocket with Robert E. Wooten Sr. from the Wooten Choral Ensemble.
Wait a minute, let me take a break. First of all, we pay homage to the spirit of Dr. Robert.
That's right.
Wooten.
Yeah.
Woo! My God.
And he actually,
excellent.
Exactly. But not only just made me, understand what gospel is, but also made me understand what reading music is too, because he too was an educator, and he had such influence on me, his son Robert Jr., and Eric Thomas, and so many others that have come under him. And so I give him credit because Jeremiah Wright and Robert Wooten were the ones who really just started the mold of me playing gospel music. I grew in my ministry of music, playing for the church and playing for the choirs there, under the auspices of who you might remember, Jeffrey Radford, who was our minister of music. And he brought in and founded the choir, the Trinity Choral Ensemble. And I was one of the first organists that played for that choir. So my roots are really embedded at Trinity United Church of Christ, where I started. And then later I went to Fisk University and became a Fisk Jubilee singer and traveled around the world with them and sang tenor. Sang tenor. I'm very proud of my Fisk University, historically black college and universities, and had a very great experience at Fisk, and that afforded me opportunities to get my degree. I finished my degree at Roosevelt because I kind of dropped out to become a radio DJ, and I was at WYCA and WCA.
What years was this?
This was like 1983, 84, 85. Wow. Yeah. And had some good times there, and saw people grow. Reverend Felicia Campbell was one of our DJs, and Pat Neal and Romy Rush and Jim Rags and all those. So I worked with some good people, Wayne Fields, and then became acquainted with not Felicia, but Melody Span Cooper and Felicia Fields, who was married to Wayne. So it was a whole lot of things. God just all connected us together in our career set and our skill set to just really become who God wanted us to be. But in my music, I will say that I had a great time and it was a great experience, but I suffered a very tragic situation. I became a crack addict.
Jesus, I'm glad that you can openly. Okay.
I became a crack addict, and that was around the time when the crack, epidemic was around, and I decided that I felt that I could do things on my own, and crack wasn't going to bother me and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, and it just took me all the way down. I lost everything. Lost my apartment, lost my home, not my home, but my car. Lost my mind, and all of that. But I had two parents, Harold and Dolores Johnson, who were not punks, and they really had to instill some tough love with me. So one night, I don't know how it happened, but I was playing for a wedding. A dear friend of mine was getting married, Tamara Fair. She's a radio DJ now. She was Tamara Thompson at that time. And I was playing for her wedding dinner at Oprah's restaurant when it was down on Oak Street or wherever it was, Elm Street. And I came home and somebody attacked me with a bat. And I was beaten up very badly, broken hand, broken ribs, arm and everything. And I had to be put into the hospital overnight. But I had determination. I was a functional addict and I wanted to make that money the next day. So I told my dad, I said, listen, you got to come get me out of this hospital because I got a wedding to play for. And my daddy was like, how you going to play for a wedding? You can't even walk. I said, Daddy, you're going to have to come get me out of here, take me home. And he did. He brought me to his home and he actually had to wash me like I was a little baby again. And he ushered me up. He had to get some of his friends to literally carry me up to an organ of this church that I had never, ever been at and never worked at. And it was called the Apostolic Church of God, where this wedding was. Years later, God would have it that I would become a member of that church and become the minister of music at the church where I founded it in my drug addiction, So anyway, in my drug addiction, I stayed at the halfway house at Cook's Manor and Haymarket House, and I was asked to start a choir, and I did. I started a choir with drug addicts, recovering addicts, and the choir became a really good choir, so much so that we were invited to the White House to sing. Wow. So we actually went to the White House, and everybody was just so profound with that. My dear friend Betty McDaniel Smith was the one who hired me when I was actually parking cars in the parking lot of Catholic Charities down at 750 East, 750 North LaSalle Avenue still down there, and I was parking cars for the executive cabinet. And we met, and she said, "What are you doing down here?" I said, "Well, what do you think?" She said, "Wow, well, I want to talk to you, and I want to work with you." And little by little, Betty started talking with me and working with me, and she asked me to start that choir. And then later on, she hired me on her staff as procurement director. Then about maybe a year later, she came and she said, "Chip, my minister, pastor wants to talk to you about helping combine the choirs at this church, at my church." I said, "Well, what church is it, Betty?" She said, "Apostolic Church of God." I said, "Okay."
Full circle.
Yeah. I said, "Where is that?" She said, "It's on 63rd." I said, "Okay." I think I remember being over there, but at this time they had just finished completion on the new edifice that they now have. And I said, "Well, who's your pastor?" Bishop Arthur M. Brazier. And I said, "Well, how old is he?" And at that time, he was about 60. I said, "Oh, Betty, I don't feel like being bothered with no old Pentecostal pastor. I just don't feel like going over there. Well, just give him a chance. Just go talk to him." And I did. And I went to talk to Arthur Brazier, and you all know him from the Apostolic Church of God. And I fell in love with him. It was just like that anointing just grabbed me and pulled me in. And he hired me that day. And from there, I became a member of the church. But the greatest thing about that is that he is the one who ushered me into my relationship with Jesus Christ. And I had really just kind of been playing church, and it was on the periphery of, oh yeah, hallelujah, blah, blah, blah. I was in church, but the church wasn't in me. Right. The Holy Spirit wasn't in me. And Bishop really got me in there. And I know he smelled the cigarette smokes because I used to be a cigarette smoker and everything, but he never said a word. But over the course of the years, I dropped all of the drugs. I dropped the cigarettes. I just dropped everything that was just against me living a full and prosperous life for Jesus Christ. And so much so that I would end up doing my dissertation on Bishop Brazier as a servant leader, along with Dr. Mahalia Hines, who was like my sister, and she was my former principal at John Hope College Prep, where I taught. So backtracking, after I left Catholic Charities, that's when I went in education. And I started at Crane Tech on the west side of Chicago, stayed over there for 2 years as a cadre. And I said, "Well, why am I doing this work as a cadre when I could be making money as a full-time teacher?" Right. And I'm just putting all of the pieces just to let you see how God really worked with me and really fed into my life. I wasn't getting the full benefits as a teacher. So I didn't have the insurance. I didn't have the pension and all that kind of stuff. And I said, "God," I said, "you got to give me a program that I can get into to get my certificate and my master's, if that's possible." And so my friend Brian Rice, who's now the minister of music at Apostolic Church of God, "Why don't you call Dr. Barbara Radner at DePaul and see if she has room in a program called the Urban Teacher Corps?" I said, "Okay, Brian, I'll check it out." I said, "Well, let me just call tonight." It was a Friday night about 11 o'clock. And I called the number just to leave a message. Do you know this woman answered the phone? "Hello, this is Dr. Ratner." I said, "Oh, Dr. Ratner, I wasn't expecting nobody to pick up the phone, but I wanted to find out more about your Urban Teacher Corps program." She said, she talked to me a little bit, and she said, "It just so happens I have one more spot." And so I left Crane to go to John Hope because Dr. Hines had to pay a little bit out of the school's budget for me to attend that, where my other principal didn't want to do that. So I said, "Let me go where the money is." And that ended up me being a very a wonderful teacher at John Hope because I got my master's and my teaching certificate in 1 year while working. And then later on, I became an administrator, and then every round just kept going higher and higher, and until I became deputy superintendent in Chicago Public Schools as a network chief, and then started as a deputy chief, network chief. Then I became chief of family and community engagement, and then later on retired when the pandemic hit. Then did three more years out in the suburbs as a chief of staff to a superintendent that I know, and retired from there in June of 2024. But I'm just saying this because I had no say in any of this. God just put all the pieces together. And even with the pandemic, in my work with the family and community engagement, I ran up against a parent of mine that I knew when I was an assistant principal in the suburbs. And she said, "Well, what are you doing now?" I said, "I'm trying to finish a doctorate. I'm working at CPS and blah, blah, blah." She was a vocal parent because we were having to close her school. And she said, well, what college are you at? I said, I'm at National Louis. She said, I'm an associate professor there. She said, we're going to get you through this doctorate. And I mean, she stayed on me for 7 months. And so for 7 months, I did whatever she asked me to do, writing and researching and things like that, and ended up defending my dissertation on servant leadership with the case studies, Dr. Mahalia Hines and Bishop Arthur Brazier. So when I think about music, God kind of pulled me back from music a little bit. I still played churches, and I still did work with different soloists and things like that. But I couldn't really travel and do the things that I wanted to do as an administrator in education. But God knew what my path should be, and it was a very wonderful and prosperous path that I just have to thank God for.
Yes. Now I have to say that I don't know. I've never used this before, but you know Reverend Jesse Jackson, right?
Mm-hmm.
There was a slogan. Do you know where I'm going with this?
I don't, but come on, I'm gonna follow you.
His slogan was "Keep hope alive."
Keep hope alive. Yeah.
Sometimes we say things, but it's so hollow, and we don't make it applicable to our lives. And I just want to encourage you all. You heard his story. Mm-hmm. Understand that if you lose hope, you lose everything. Mm-hmm. So keep hope alive, whatever it is what you're going through. And on that note, I think it's safe to take a musical intermission. And I think the best song is to go to "Oh Holy Night," because it was a holy night when our Jesus Christ was born. And we'll be right back.
Hope you enjoy it.
Yeah. Hi, Eric Maurice Clark here, sharing ways that you can support Gospel Diaries. First and foremost, thank you so much for your interest in this platform, and let's support every artist that appears on this program. All right, so we do have a magazine. It's entitled The Gospel Music Gazette, and you can obtain a copy by going to ericmauriceclark.com. That will help us share and help spread our purpose here at Gospel Diaries. Also, you can donate by way of Zelle, Cash App, or traditionally through mail. We do appreciate you, and as I always say, love on someone and you will change your life. Bye. There we go. Let's see. Now, wasn't that beautiful? Thank you so much, Mr. Chip.
You're
Dr.
welcome.
Chip. Well, I'm just enjoying myself. Thank you for sharing your story, your testimony, come by the words of a testimony.
Of their testimony, right? Yeah, exactly. And I have walked in that, and one of the things that I do not do is that people will know my story and they'll say, well, can you help my child, or can you help my uncle? Can you help this? I don't help like that. I'm very intentional about how I go into ministering and how I talk to people. Because sometimes we get too cocky and we think that because we're not in it anymore, that the enemy does not have the persuasion to pull you back.
Yeah.
And so sometimes you have to stay away from those places, stay away from those people, and stay away from those things that can have a grip on you to pull you back. So when people come to me and they'll say, you know what, Chip, I'm on drugs and I just really need some help. Can you help me? That's when I'll talk to them. But I only go so far, because if I don't see that you're really committed to your recovery or to your deliverance, I don't spend time, because everybody has to want it. I wanted it. And I remember when I would be getting high and I'd have that pipe in my mouth, and for some reason I would see little dark images going against the wall. Like that movie Ghost. When you ever see those black images?
Right.
Well, I saw those against the wall. And I would pray. I said, Lord, with this pipe in my mouth, I know that you do not like what I'm doing, but I like it right now. So help me not to like it so much, and continue to protect me with your hand of mercy, that I would be protected from the enemy. I don't want to die from this. I don't want to be wounded. Yeah. I said, but I know that if I call on Jesus, he will answer my prayer.
I'm trying not to cry. So as it relates to gospel songs, like when you were going through, was there any gospel songs that kind of kept ringing in your head?
Oh yeah. So let me tell you, when I was beat with the bat, this hand, my right hand, was crushed, and there was a lot of bones broken in my hand, and it was in a cast. Doctor told me I would never play again, and I said, that's a lie, and I just kept on believing that I would. So I went into rehab, into treatment at Haymarket House. Stayed there for 33 days. I was in a cast, cast on my leg, on my hand, walking with crutches. I was just really messed up. God had it so that, and let me tell you another story about how I got in there. Because when my mother and father, and this is what I'm talking about, tough love, my mother and father, my mother, so much so, she was the stronger one. And she said, after I played for that wedding, she said, well, did you enjoy yourself? Because I was at her house, at their house. And I said, yeah, Mama, I really enjoyed myself. I'm never going to do drugs again. She said, well, I hope not. She said, because you're getting out of here. I said, what? She said, oh, yeah, you can't stay here. She said, I'm not going to sit in my house and worry about somebody coming and shooting up my windows and all that kind of stuff because of your foolishness. So me and your daddy going to put you in the car in the morning and take you to Haymarket House. We've already checked it out. They told me you don't have to stay. But if you don't stay, don't come back here. Because at this point, I'd rather see you dead. Because at least I'll know where you are. She said, so you make the choice. I'm going to drop you off. You decide what you're going to do, but don't come back to my house. And I knew that that was so hard for my mother to say to me, because me and my mother were like this. But she had seen so many of her friends be used and abused by their sons and daughters through drugs, that she said she wasn't going to have it. And they dropped me off. And I stayed there. And I was only supposed to stay in detox 24 hours. A man came to me and he said, I was laying on the floor. My pillows, my gym shoes were my pillows. And they gave me a little mat and a blanket. And I'm laying on the floor. And when I had to get up that day, he came. He said, man, I know you from somewhere. He said, what do you do? I said, well, I'm a musician. I was playing organ at such and such. He said, at Christ Universal Temple. I said, yeah.
Wait a minute. I'm so sorry. So this was after. This was post Christ.
This is supposed to, I got into education and everything.
Lord
right?
Have mercy.
Yeah, this is after, in my,
yes,
in between music and education.
Yes.
And so he said, I'm supposed to be putting you out today. He said, but I'm going to see if I can get you another 24 hours. And let's see if we can get you into a 5-day program. All depends on what you want to do. And that brother, I never did remember his name, but he got me into a 5-day program, and I went upstairs and got 3 hots and a cot. And that was wonderful because I had a bed and food. And that 5 day became 14 days. That 14 became 20 days, and that 20 days became 33 days. And God just had his hand on me where he gave me a room and a bed at Cook's Manor in the halfway house where I stayed for a year and a half. You know, so I wanted to bring that point back into because this is how the hand of God had me in my path to recovery, to deliverance, to just being free, you know. So these are the things that brought me there. And I was
gospel songs.
So back to that. In the treatment center, Father McDermott was the Catholic priest, and he was over it, and he would do mass on Sunday, and I started to heal, and so all my addict brothers and everything were around me and everything. We were all in the mass, and so I went up to him and I said, Father McDermott, do you mind if I could ask you one thing? He said, what is it, my son? Can I go over to the piano just to see if I can play again? And I went over to that piano. And I sat down. My hand was still in the cast, and all I had was this. But I sat there, and I played, I come to the garden alone while the dew is still on. And I just started playing it and playing it. When I turned around, all my brothers that were with me were crying. Because that song had just anointed the whole room.
Because he walked with you.
He walked with me.
He talked
and told me that I am his own. And the joy that we share as we tarry there, none other has ever known. And I'm telling you, that's one of my favorite hymns.
Man, I might have to get you.
You know,
but go ahead.
That's one of my favorite hymns. And I played that, and they cried, I cried. But I just thanked God because I said, you can play again, you know. And so God, his grace and mercy has brought me through.
Yes. Now, you know, I forgot to ask you this. We would be remiss if we don't ask you this. Now, how did you start playing? Like, what was the origins of you?
I started playing when I was 4 years old, and I sat at the on a little toy box that my parents had given me for Christmas. And I sat there and I started plunking out, We Shall Overcome, because that was the civil rights anthem in the 1960s. And I was 4 years old, 1964. And Dr. King had just been killed. No, he was killed in 68. Right? He had just done something. I forgot what he was.
You remember the time when Dr. King...
Okay. Kennedy had just been killed.
63.
Yeah, 60, right,
yeah, okay,
right.
Okay.
And then, but this anthem would resonate even with Kennedy. And all you'd hear on TV is, We Shall Overcome.
Right.
We shall, no. And so I started plucking it out on the keyboard. And one time my mother heard me, and she started calling all her friends. Girl, you got to hear this. Chip is down here playing We Shall Overcome. She was late for work that day. Chip, play it again. I'd play it again. Play it again. Play.
Proud mama.
Okay, ain't gonna be no more overcoming if I got to keep playing this. She was proud. And from there, they brought me a Hammond organ.
They bought you a Hammond. Wait, a spinner or
a spinet?
A spinet.
Yeah.
Okay.
With the little pedals. And back then, the music teachers was coming to the house.
Okay.
So my music teacher came to the house. It was Sidonia Brooks, and she would come. Then later on, I would go over to her studio because she had a studio in the Princeton Park area, and I took lessons with her. And then later on, I told you Robert Wooten and Bobby and all of them. So yeah, that's how everything just started climbing up.
Oh yeah.
So my neighbors, 2 doors down, they were moving. They had a Wurlitzer organ, and my parents bought that for me.
Wow.
And that's how I was able to really play with full. It was good, but hey, at that point, at that place, you just wanted something.
Christmas spirit to you. We want to hear. Let's see here. What we want to hear. We want to hear. Have yourself a merry little Christmas. By the way, I would like to share this fun fact. Do you all know that movie? I mean that song was sung by Judy Garland and Meet Me in St. Louis. It debuted in Meet Me in St. Louis. So if you want to watch a good classic Christmas movie, check out Meet Me in St. Louis, and we'll be right back.
And but nobody can sing like Nat King Cole.
You're right. Well, okay, cool. I'll give it to you. We'll be back. Hi, Eric Maurice Clark here, sharing ways that you can support Gospel Diaries. First and foremost, thank you so much for your interest in this platform, and let's support every artist that appears on this program. All right, so we do have a magazine. It's entitled The Gospel Music Gazette, and you can obtain a copy by going to ericmaurice.clark.com. That will help us share and help spread our purpose here at Gospel Diaries. Also, you can donate by way of Zelle, Cash App, or traditionally through mail. We do appreciate you, and as I always say, love on someone and you will change your life. Bye. All right, we're back. And listen here, now it's time to delve a little bit more into the experience, your musicianship, the experiences of being on the road with all these gospel greats and more. So let's start here. What was the first aggregation or first group or famous gospel singer that you played for?
So she wasn't a gospel singer, but she was a singer and she was a show all by herself.
Okay.
That was Sue Conway.
Yes, yes.
And Sue Conway had a group called the Victory Singers. Prior to me coming in, Rufus Hill was the keyboard player and the music director. And Rufus Hill did a lot of Broadway plays and things like that. Matter of fact, Rufus Hill even, I won't say he discovered her, but he worked with her, Jennifer Hudson, and did some recordings for Jennifer, excuse me. But me and Sue, we actually toured all over Italy. We had a great promoter, a great manager, and great singers. We had Dee Alexander, Teresa was there from the Emotions, Percy Littleton. It was just so many people that Ellen Samuels, who's now gone, but Sue Conway was a phenomenal show. And when they would come to hear us, it would just be packed out. We are trailblazers because we did our first gospel concert in Milan, Italy at La Scala. And that was a really feather in our cap because gospel had never been presented at La Scala before. And so we were on the road. And then later, Robert Mays had a group called Meta 4 that Shirley was a part of. Sarah was part of it, Connie Kinnison and Valerie. It was 4 of them. And Bob was known over there. Bob was a phenomenal person anyway. He was a producer, commercial jingle writer, singer, and performer, and then great minister of music at Christ Universal Temple. But he started that group, and then they toured all over Europe. He got sick and later passed. And nobody else could take the job of going on the road with Shirley and them but me. So I went over there with them as Metaphor, and then later on, because Shirley was so powerful in her presentation, the group later became the Shirley Wall Singers.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Shirley Walls, we love you. We want to take this moment and let you know that we love you and thank you so much for your contributions.
That's right.
And we appreciate you. I cannot say it enough. Okay.
That's my other country singer, sister. And so we toured all over Europe, had some great singers there. Takora Rogers Harper was one of them. That was she's now deceased as well. With Roxanna Bibbs. I don't know if you have Roxy.
She did sing with James Herndon.
Yeah.
And if I'm not mistaken, she sang with Dorothy Norwood.
Yeah, exactly.
She lives here.
She lives here. Yeah. And she has a lot of stories too. But and Dolores Washington was with us on some of those tours.
Yes, okay.
We also took Bridget Hurt with us.
So we're talking 90s, right?
Yeah. But Bridget Campbell, who's now Bridget Hurt, she was part of us. Felicia Welch from the Chicago Mass Choir. So we had some great singers. Great talent with us, all female, and I was the only male. And we toured with just piano. And every single time we came back home, I had blisters all on my fingers. Because
blisters on your
we were actually in Spain. Let me give you a story. We were in Spain, and we had the microphones and everything. We were in the orchestra hall in the what's the islands in Spain, Canary Islands. And the orchestra hall was phenomenal, all wood, and we were singing, and we were had our music going and everything with the mics, and we do the first number. They said, so Shirley, I don't know what's wrong with them. I went on to the second number. They went, and so I said, I don't know what's wrong with these people. They don't seem to be enjoying us too much, and so Shirley gave some words and everything and started talking, and somebody jumped up in the audience and said, "No migros, no migros." And so I said, "What is he saying?" Shirley said, "I think he's saying no Negroes." I said, "Shirley, I don't think it. No migros, no migros." And it meant microphone. Yeah. No microphones. So I said, "Oh, they want an acoustic performance." So I said, "Shirley, you all take the mics, put them behind you." I took the piano lid and I closed it. I said, when you all clap now, don't clap open-handed. Clap on your, do this. Don't make the sound, but just clap so that you're just giving the pulse, but not making a slap, because then that would resonate too. We did that. That first number we did with, like that with just acoustic. We got a standing ovation. Charles was a prolific musician and spent many years arranging, producing, and playing for Dolores Barrett Campbell and the Barrett Sisters. And if you notice, I always say Dolores Barrett Campbell and the Barrett Sisters because that's how I've always known them. They later became the Barrett Sisters. I just kind of stuck to Dolores Barrett Campbell. But yeah, he got to a point where he wanted to just kind of sit down, and he was tired of the road and everything like that. And Dolores called me up and said, "Chip, I want you to play for us. Charles got tired of us. I want you to play." So I said, "Sure." So I had to spend time learning all their repertoire and everything like that, and had a great time traveling Europe and different parts of the world with Dolores and the Barrett Sisters, Billy and Rodessa.
Rodessa, we love you. She's
love Rodessa. Love. They were just the sweethearts, the sweethearts of song. And we had, and you're talking about funny. I mean, we had, half of what you all saw in Amen Somebody is not all of the. Dolores was a true comedian.
Okay.
Her sisters were true comedians.
Oh, bro, that's
so
right. I've experienced that, but go ahead.
Yeah, and so we were, matter of fact, we were in Switzerland, in Basel, and we were on a stage. They had to actually put Dolores on the stage, and lift her up on the stage. And so I was always in charge. I was rolling Dolores and playing for her. And so she got to going, and I mean, they loved the Barrett sisters in Europe. They loved them. And they'd get standing ovations, sold out crowds everywhere. And when Dolores would get happy and want to show off, she'd get out she'd stand up out the wheelchair, almost stand up, and she'd go to shaking her behind. And I'm standing behind her. I said, Lois, I can't believe you sitting up here shaking your behind with these people in this church. But they went crazy. I had to holler. Eric Peterson had Albertina, and I had Dolores Barrett Campbell. And we were in a hotel in the lobby, getting ready to do some type of event. Tina was singing, and Dolores was singing in Barrett Sisters. And Eric rolled Tina up next to Dolores Barrett Campbell. I'm standing there, and she looks over at Dolores. She said, well, you can't breathe and I can't walk. No, she said, you can't walk and I can't breathe, because she was wearing the oxygen at that time. And we fell out laughing, but, she, as she started to decline in her health, both Dolores and Albertina, they did it with humor. Yeah. They never really rested in sorrow. They did it with humor. When I went to see Dolores the last time I saw her alive, they had put a feeding tube in her stomach. And she said, now, Mr. Chip, it's going to kill me, because if I can't eat nothing, I don't need to be here. I said, well, Lois, you just hang on. I was going on a cruise the next day. And about 2 days later, when I was on that cruise, Dolores passed. But I knew that if Dolores could not have the quality of life that she wanted, there wasn't no need for her to stay here. And she was really certain and really etched in stone that she was going home to be with the Lord. She had no problems with that. And so, those are the kind of testimonies that have helped me out. And those Barrett sisters really fed into my spirit.
And I say that to say, like, be an inspiration to somebody. You never know your kind acts can be breath or give someone a new meaning for living. And on that note, I think it's perfect to play, let's see, the Christmas song.
Gotcha. Good? That's good.
We'll be right back. Yep. All right. All right, welcome back. I pray to God you all enjoyed that. You ain't went nowhere.
No, I enjoyed the song myself.
All right, let's kind of just have some fun here. Okay, two things that you are grateful for most.
So I am grateful for hearing the voice of God and following what He had for me. Mm-hmm. You know, we all have aspirations where we want to be a professional musician. I would have loved to have been on the road with somebody for most of my life and things like that. I'd have loved to have been a great producer like Quincy Jones and been, a friend of mine, John Reed, who plays for Barry Manilow, mm-hmm. Y.L. Douglas, who plays for Barry Manilow, from Chicago. I would have loved to have done things like that. Mm-hmm. But God did not have that in my path. And so I'm grateful that I didn't resist and rebel. Okay. But I went towards the path that God had for me as a professional educator.
That's good.
And that life has really afforded me a lot of just great rewards, awards, recognition, and just a lot of gratitude for just being able to help children and speak into their lives, speak into their lives of adults, because they always say children ain't got it together. Some of these adults don't have it together either. True, yeah. And just being able to speak into the lives of principals and assistant principals, assistant superintendents, people like that, just who are looking for hope. And I've had a great career. Even now I'm retired. I'm still doing it. I'm still working as a retired administrator for Chicago Public Schools, a system that I love very much. And I don't care what anybody says about Chicago Public Schools. We are a slamming district in this nation, and we do some great things for children.
You taught at Columbia. Can we talk about that for me?
You know what? I'm going to tell you. While I was at John Hope, I'm going to tell you, I had Jonathan McReynolds on a program that I would produce at John Hope called the John Hope Idol. And his mother brought Jonathan over to the school to audition, and we put Jonathan in the contest. And Jonathan won singing, I forgot what he sang, but Mama McReynolds, she would know what it was because she always reminds me. And he won. And then later on, I had him as a student. He was a student at Whitney Young, but I was chosen along with some other colleagues of mine to start a summer choir for Mayor Daley. And Jonathan McReynolds became part of that choir. So he was a student of mine then. And then later, I became an adjunct professor at Columbia College, where Jonathan McReynolds was getting his degree. He was a freshman, I think. And I became the director of the class that taught gospel and Negro spirituals. And Jonathan did not really like to sing. He was an organist and liked to play, and he's just very talented. But I said, Jonathan, you need to come out a little bit more. I need you more forward with this. So what I did, I became a mentor to Jonathan and made him like the assistant director of the choir. So I would teach different parts, but I'd have him teach music and teach choir to the students. And it started to build up his presence and things like that. And he became just a great choir director, a great leader, and really got more confidence about himself when he wasn't on the instrument. Right. And so as I saw him grow later on, I'm on his board, the Elihu Nation board. I still love him. He's like my little son to me. Matter of fact, he'll be in concert here starting his tour, his Christmas tour. And I heard him singing about some little young lady and things like that. I say, my brother's singing love songs now. Okay. And I'm wrong with it. right. So, but I'm so proud of him and the man that he has become. Yes. He comes from good stock, the McReynolds family. Yes. And so I'm really grateful for Jonathan McReynolds, for a lot of other students that I had at Columbia, and you all know who you are, that were doing great work. They're out there doing media, they're doing social media, they're doing producing, they're doing a whole lot. They're professional singers, and they were a good group. Yeah. And I'm proud to be over them. So when I couldn't do it anymore because of educational administration, and I asked Walter Owens, could he take it?
From
and
Salem? Yeah. Oh, I love it. Is it, for some reason, I have to throw this name in here, Mahalia Jackson. My mind goes to the movie. What was the movie with?
Imitation of Life.
No, not that one. With Billy Preston. was it St. Louis Blues?
Okay,
you remember that one?
Mm-hmm.
She was in there singing "Hype the Window, Let the Dove Come Down."
Yeah.
It's something about a singer that knows how to paint an image on a canvas that you're like, oh, this is a beautiful image.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? And
exactly.
Mahalia Jackson, she did a splendid job painting these images that we still have today. Because I just think about her Christmas album, and every song on her Christmas album, she sings it with so much diction.
Yeah.
It's just a phenomenal,
and that's why Aretha was so successful, because she was able to adapt some of those phrasings and things like that Mahalia got, because she listened to Mahalia for years at her daddy's house, and Mahalia was just phenomenal. Mahalia did most of her gospel on jazz circuits and blues circuits. Yeah. And a lot of her audiences were white. We knew her. Sometimes you're a stranger.
Did you ever meet her?
I did.
Really?
Yeah, she actually lived at 85th in Michigan, 84th in Michigan. I forget it. I'm having a brain freeze. I'm 64, but he lives in her house now.
Congressman Roland Burris.
Roland Burris, right? I was at her house one time. Matter of fact, my good friend Leslie Page, her aunts used to cook for Mahalia Jackson, and they lived at 84th and in 84th and Michigan, and Mahalia was right up the street and around the corner. And so they would actually cook for Mahalia Jackson's parties when she'd have the ministers over there. So I remember Mahalia, because when Mahalia died, I was 11, so I was very young. She died in 71. And I remember that Mahalia had such an impact on me that I felt that she visited me in her death.
Really?
Yeah, I had a Mahalia visitation that I felt like I had.
Did you go to her funeral?
I didn't go to the funeral, no. But I remember when it was down there at Eric Crown Theater. And I just loved Mahalia, because that was the only essence of gospel that we had in the 1970s, based on the upsurgence or the upcoming of the Edwin Hawkins singers with "Oh Happy Day." We didn't have a lot of gospel music back then. Church of God in Christ did, though, and we had Negro spirituals. But yeah, had a lot with Mahalia. But the other thing is that the influence Mahalia had on Aretha Franklin, and then there was another, Albertina Walker. If you listen to how Albertina sings, she paints a picture. I remember she did came to Trinity years ago, and she did a live version of "Life Is Like a Mountain Railroad." You would think you was on the train. she sang that thing so well, you thought you was either a conductor, a passenger, or the engineer, because with an engineer, and and I would always tease Tina. I'd say, what, you really kind of camouflaging yourself. You really a blues singer. I said, yeah, you really queen of the blues. She said, shut up, boy, shut up.
Now look, I feel like a Baptist preacher shaking your hand one more time.
Yeah, right. May the Lord watch.
Well, listen, I've just had a blast, okay? And we're going to leave you with Go Tell It on the Mountain, but as I always say, love on someone and you will change your life.
That's
we'll
it.
See you later. Merry Christmas.
Y'all. Merry Christmas, everybody. Sing it. Go tell it on the mountain, over the hill.